Unfortunately, the pandemic has slightly slewed things in as much as it's hard to spend as much time with the Queen.
Rumors of financial concealment have plagued the royal family for years. However, this most recent discovery has the potential to completely upend the monarchy. The palace walls shook when Duchess Sophie, Prince Edward's wife, revealed startling evidence of pilfered royal riches. Not only did her bombshell claims reveal covert transactions, they pointed fingers in unexpected places. Now that Princess Beatrix's husband is involved in the affair, rumors are getting louder. Is this the worst financial betrayal of royalty to date? The reality is more sinister than one might think. The palace was stunned by the startling revelation. The tension building within Buckingham Palace in fall 2025 was reflected in the chill of London. A silent storm endangered the monarchy amid opulent halls and centuries of regal heritage. Duchess Sophie, calm and collected following years in the public eye, strolled to the gloomy Royal Finance Office in the east wing of the palace. There, encircled by ledgers and screens, she had to deal with a task that was very different from ceremonies. Facing the unseen chaos that was silently assembling behind polished doors, a discreet audit of Queen Elizabeth II's private estate assets. An account laden with centuries of royal trust and tradition seemed like a straightforward task to her. Sophie had previously completed reviews of this type, which were predictable, well-organized, and never made headlines. However, there was a distinct feeling in the air that morning, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. The sound of computers humming softly filled the quiet as she sat down at a large oak desk. She traced columns of statistics with a deft hand. Rows of brilliant spreadsheets were mirrored in her keen blue eyes. Up until it wasn't, everything was in order. The name that shouldn't have been there was there. Mosey Limited, Emma Pell. Sophie froze. The name immediately brought back memories for her. One of the family's members, Princess Beatrice, was married to Edoardo Mapelli Mozzi, a refined real estate tycoon. It was a stunning figure next to it. A few months prior, $1 million transfer was made in secret. No explanation, no accounting notes, and no royal consent. Her heartbeat accelerated. Such a deal wasn't simply suspicious in the realm of royal money, where every pound was linked to history. It was risky. It alluded to something more profound and purposefully concealed. Her breath fogged slightly on the screen as she moved in closer. Is there a mistake? An incorrectly filed entry? Or was she gazing at the first strand of a skillfully constructed lie? A clock chimed in the distance. The fog outside London grew thicker, enveloping the palace in a spectral silence. With her intuition heightening, Sophie got up and closed the door. She had learned from years spent in royal circles that the most deadly scandals were frequently the quietest ones. Her trusty financial advisor, Henry Grayson, responded in a way that made her feel even more uneasy. Before he spoke, the man's eyes darted to the door, and he appeared pale. "There are orders from the top," he whispered, "to your Royal Highness." "Orders," Sophie insisted. "It's best not to ask too many questions. Some accounts are designed to stay closed." "From whom?" Henry stopped, his voice lowering to a whisper. That one remark sent a chill down Sophie's spine, colder than the fog outside. Since the king's health started to deteriorate, there had been rumors about Queen Camilla's financial reorganizations and subtle changes in the way royal assets were managed. Some said it was modernization, others whispered of power being quietly redistributed. But this was different. Sophie knew what such discoveries could mean. A false accusation could destroy reputations, but ignoring it could destroy the monarchy's already fragile trust. Later that evening, as she looked out from her private quarters over the palace gardens, the leaves rustled like pages in the mist. A black car pulled away from the palace gates, and her heart pounded with quiet resolve. "This ink stain will not fade unnoticed," she vowed silently as she turned back to her desk, her reflection blending with the cold light of the computer screen. As the clock struck midnight in Buckingham Palace, the echoes of that vow seemed to travel down every gilded corridor. A promise that beneath the crown's polished surface, the truth was about to awaken. What did Sophie discover as she investigated the anomaly further? How did the innocent young royals feel about the culprit's business vision for the royal family? The air seemed to hum with tension. Autumn painted the trees outside Clarence's house in a fiery storm. The weekly finance meetings used to be routine, with polished reports, courteous smiles, and whispered approvals, but lately they had turned into her battlefield. At the head of the gleaming oak table sat Edoardo, a 42-year-old Italian-born property mogul with the effortless charm of someone used to winning. His suits were tailored, his hair slicked back with surgical precision, and his eyes, those sharp, assessing eyes, never stopped calculating. He dazzled the room with smooth presentations about strategic modernization. Every slide glowed with promises, bold European expansions, and glittering profit projections. The younger royals nodded enthusiastically. They saw a visionary, but Sophie saw danger. Sitting quietly at the far end in her immaculate high-necked navy dress, she watched, took notes, and waited. Numbers were her language, whispering secrets that no one else could hear. Such as a £2.7 million claim that only showed $1.9 million in the books. A sudden payment to a consulting firm connected to Edoardo's own Banda Property Group. Her hand hardly shook as she circled the discrepancies and read. By the end of the meeting, she already knew what she was going to do. That night, in the quiet of her Kensington study, she wrote a series of emails to the royal auditors. Calm, exact, and devastating, she knew what was going to happen. A few days later, the counterattack started. Edoardo's tone changed from courteous to poisonous. He excluded her from group conversations, unintentionally left her out of important briefings, and whispered to others that she was stuck in old ways. Nevertheless, Sophie persevered, using her silence as a shield. Every attempt to isolate her only strengthened her resolve. Then the envelope arrived one rainy morning, slipped under her name in block letters, with the words, "If you knew where the money really went, you would never sleep again." Beneath the note were photocopied invoices, grainy but clear enough to read, for an $850,000 transfer to an offshore account. Signed by M. Edoardo M. Mapelli. Sophie's heart pounded. She locked the door, spread the papers across her desk, and started matching signatures one by one. By dawn, she was positive the money trail was real. The atmosphere inside Clarence's house changed. Whispers followed her down the hallways. Beatrice, who had previously been warm but now appeared defensive, her eyes clouded with guilt or fear, and Sir Reginald, the palace advisor, avoided her. The walls were closing in. A week later, a second envelope arrived, this time containing a small USB drive. Her hand trembled as she plugged it in, and then she heard Edoardo calm and smug, talking about off-book deals, shell accounts, and redirected funds. The voice was unmistakable, but who had sent it? Sophie's reflection glistened in the dark laptop screen. Her jaw set, her eyes hard, and she realized that there was no turning back now. Edoardo saw the crown as nothing more than a pawn in a bigger game. And for her, it was justice rather than loyalty. Every hallway now felt like a labyrinth of secrets. Every encounter was a test of bravery. The palace air grew colder and heavier, as if the very walls had learned to listen. And Sophie walked steadily, her every step resonating with purpose. The storm outside had peaked, but the real tempest was still to come. How did Sophie confront the culprit? Was he able to address her concerns, or did he defensively reject the claims? Let's get into the specifics of Royal Lodge, Rover, her camel coat sweeping behind her like a cloak of resolve. Hadn't called ahead because she wanted this to be a shock, a confrontation that would reveal what she already knew. Inside the private tea room, the air was filled with the scent of bergamot and tension. Beatrice sat by the fireplace, her usual warmth replaced by suspicion. Eduardo lounged beside her, seemingly calm, but with a flicker of unease behind his charming smile. When Sophie walked in, no one offered tea. She didn't sit, but instead placed a leather folder on the table and whispered, "You need to see this." The crackling fire filled the silence for a long period before Sophie remarked in a controlled tone that cut through the room like, "Glass, bank transfers. Company links, missing funds. Audio recordings." Beatrice's serenity broke first, her face flushed crimson, her flame-red hair framing her rage like a burning halo. "This is absurd," she yelled, standing so quickly that her chair scratched the floor. "You've always resented him," she said. Every detail fell with the accuracy of a surgeon's knife. "The modern vision is our happiness. Do you really believe that integrity is only understood by the Wessexes?" Anger quivered in her voice, but there was dread underneath. Eduardo's charming facade started to come off. His gaze flicked to the folder and back again. He answered casually, "You misunderstand the figures," but his tone betrayed him. All transfers were approved. They were investments, not larceny. They were investments, not larceny. Sophie, however, did not flinch. Calm, steady, and almost cold, she opened the folder and pulled out a small recorder. She pressed play, and Eduardo's voice filled the room. Calm, deliberate, unmistakable. "Keep it under the radar. The board won't question royal funding." The words hung like smoke in the air. Beatrice froze, her anger dissipating into disbelief. Her husband's voice, so familiar and trusted, now sounded like a stranger's confession. Her eyes darted to him in their opulent apartment at St. James's Palace hours later. Beatrice wandered aimlessly, the opulence around her suddenly feeling hollow. And the ticking of a clock became intolerable. She reached for something, anything to calm her down, and as she tidied his desk, her fingers brushed an envelope tucked beneath a ledger. Her stomach nodded. Inside were contracts, official, stamped, and bearing Eduardo's bold signature, naming his private company as sole beneficiary to a series of royal redevelopment projects. Millions redirected under the pretense of modernization. Her heart fell. "Risks, B," he said softly as he grasped her hand. "I'm securing our future for us," he said, but his touch now seemed strange. Beatrice's eyes strayed to the wall-mounted photographs of forebears who had persevered through scandal, banishment, and selflessness to uphold the family's honor. Their painted eyes appeared to be staring back at her, curious about her next move. Beatrice sat by herself at her desk that night while the palace slept, barefoot and shaking not from terror, but from the pain of betrayal. After turning on her laptop, she made copies of all the files she could find and put them in an envelope. She wrote a brief message when the first rays of morning peeked through the curtains. Before Sophie had a chance to reconsider, she conveyed it to her. "If you are right, protect this family no matter what it costs." By the time the sun rose over the Thames, an unanticipated alliance had formed out of suffering rather than loyalty or ambition. And the maelstrom Sophie had unleashed was just getting started in the silent halls of the palace. When, where, and how did Princess Sophie expose Princess Beatrice's husband's crimes? What was the meeting's response? Let's examine the revelation in more detail. The heartbreaking betrayal was exposed in Buckingham Palace's secret council chamber, a space filled with gleaming brass, old oak, and long-kept secrets. Before a storm, tension crackled like electricity. There was more to the meeting than just royal formality. Pretenses and polished grins came to an end on this day of judgment. Sophie came in first, her eyes as piercing as glass, yet her face serene. Behind her were Princess Beatrice, who was pale but composed, and her husband, Eduardo. whose charm appeared to be diminished by the accusations. The papers were neatly placed on the large table, which shone beneath the chandeliers, yet each sheet seemed heavy with whispered facts. A number of documents and charts illuminated the screen in front of them as the session got underway. That were diverted, offshore accounts and sham corporations set up in obscure Italian towns. There was no mistaking the pattern. Millions had been secretly embezzled by someone. Unquestionably, the trail led to Edoardo Mapelli Mozzi. Edoardo reclined, his graceful demeanor concealing the fear beneath. Then he talked with a coolness that seemed too calculated to be real. His voice was smooth but strained as he replied, "This is absurd, a deliberate smear to destroy my reforms and reputation. My adversaries have made their way here." He spun words like silk, responding to every look with icy defiance. He was the royal outsider falsely accused, standing strong against unseen hands, and for a brief period, some might have believed him. But then he became conceited, declaring, "I have done nothing wrong." He pounded the table gently to draw attention to it. The atmosphere became tense. "This is beneath the dignity of this institution." Beatrice had kept quiet the entire time, her hands clenched in her lap. Her heart was thundering inside, though she had replayed every discrepancy, late call, and anxious glance over and over again throughout restless evenings. And she knew what she needed to do when the last document, the one that contained the truth, arrived that morning. She got up slowly. There was silence in the room. As their gazes locked, her husband's assured smile wavered. His was filled with increasing terror, hers with despair. She pulled out a single contract, frayed at the edges but clearly marked with the royal seal, from a tiny folder. Without saying anything, she put it in front of him. Members of the council bent forward. With a powerful and unmistakable signature, Edoardo's gaze flew across the page. Not a stand-in. Like a shroud, silence fell. The weighty, ruthless, and decisive truth hung in the air. The color faded from his face. The facade of intelligence and charm broke. "This is a ruse," he spat, his voice already shaking. "Beatrice, you've been duped. You are more familiar with me than this." The table was slammed by his fist. The room shook with the echo. Aide gasped, and Sophie winced. The protocol vanished. Disbelief and sympathy replaced the council's cool formality. Next, the old head of the council spoke in a quiet, melancholy voice. "The transfers have been verified by the Bank of Italy. Funds moved through subsidiaries into personal accounts disguised as consulting fees. The evidence is conclusive," he said. Edoardo's shoulders sagged as the weight of exposure crushed him where he stood. Pride, his lifelong armor, crumbled into dust. Beatrice remained motionless, her tears falling silently, glistening under the golden lights. When Beatrice finally spoke, her voice was soft but sharp as steel, and every word carried the agony of a heart that had just broken to protect something bigger. The council chamber returned to silence as if the walls themselves mourned what they had witnessed. Love had been sacrificed on the altar of duty. A royal legacy was saved, but two souls were forever scarred. Could this leave Princess Beatrice's marriage with an unforgettable blow? Can she bear the betrayal from her husband? Let's examine the specifics of their already precarious marriage. Princess Beatrice's life once looked like a modern fairy tale. When she married Edoardo Mapelli Mozzi in the summer of 2020, their wedding was small and intimate, a strictly private ceremony held under the soft glow of the pandemic's restrictions. There were no crowds or flashing cameras, only close family, flowers and vows whispered in a time when the world stood still. It seemed like a love story written in calm defiance of chaos. Afterward, Beatrice and Edoardo appeared to settle into a blissful rhythm. Together, they welcomed two daughters, Sienna and Athena, and often looked like the perfect young family. Edoardo already had a son, Wolfie, from his previous relationship with architect Dara Huang. And by all accounts, Beatrice embraced him warmly. From the outside, their blended family seemed harmonious. But as time has revealed with many royal romances, not everything golden glitters forever. Recent whispers in royal circles suggest that Princess Beatrice and Eduardo's marriage may be showing signs of strain. The cracks were particularly noticeable at Royal Ascot 2025, where the couple, normally poised and warm, appeared distant and tense, their smiles faint and eyes rarely meeting. Insiders suggest deeper, long-standing tensions contribute to the strain. Before Beatrice, Eduardo had been engaged to Dara Huang, mother of his son Wolfie, and they continued to co-parent amicably. While intended as a mature arrangement, this ongoing relationship reportedly created friction in his marriage to Beatrice. Sources indicate that Beatrice initially tried to remain calm, but gradually desired clearer boundaries. While Dra is said to have felt that her relationship with Eduardo might have persisted if not for Beatrice. These subtle underlying dynamics have occasionally resurfaced, casting a quiet shadow over the couple's private life and public appearances. Yet beyond personal issues, there may also be royal pressures at play. When Prince William eventually becomes king, his cousins Beatrice and Eugenie are expected to take on greater royal responsibilities. Though neither currently holds the title of a working royal, experts like Majesty Magazine's Ingrid Seward believe that could soon change. When William ascends the throne, Seward explained, Beatrix and Eugenie will be valuable assets. It makes perfect sense for him to involve them. While this prediction might sound honorable, it could also reshape Beatrice and Eduardo's world. Becoming the husband of a full-time working royal could require adjustments he never imagined, such as the glare of cameras, the scrutiny of tabloids, and the expectation to smile even when the heart is heavy. If the couple is already experiencing emotional distance, the additional burden of royal duty could widen that gap. Long trips, official events, and relentless attention often leave little room for intimacy. History has shown that even the most loving relationships can bend under the royal spotlight. Beatrice was born into royal life. Beatrice and Eduardo's marriage started as a quiet promise amid worldwide silence, two souls choosing love when everything else was uncertain. Years later, the silence around them feels heavier, more questioning. Only time will tell whether their story will rediscover its spark or fade into the long list of royal romances that lost their magic under the weight of expectation. For now, the once picture-perfect couple walks a delicate line between royal obligation and personal happiness. A reminder that even in castles, hearts can ache, just like everyone else's. What lessons has the royal family learned from the betrayal scandal? The dramatic aftermath and long-lasting legacy. Can Eduardo get any protection from the heat of the betrayal? Let's find out. As scandal's venom silently seeped through the polished marble halls of the palace, its consequences were swift and unforgiving. There was no public shouting, no sensational headlines splashed across tabloids, only a quiet, merciless eraser. Eduardo, once admired and celebrated, found himself stripped of everything that had defined him, including titles, privileges, roles, and access to the highest levels of society. The law followed, and unyielding and impartial charges of embezzlement and fraud were exposed. No royal favor could shield him, not even a whisper of influence or prestige. Even a clinical trial, once a testament to his ambition and social sway, offered no protection. The crown's message was stark and unmistakable. In the eyes of the law, no one was above accountability. Convicted and disgraced, Eduardo disappeared from the tailored Savile Row suites, and the glossy society pages transformed into a cautionary tale, a monument to unchecked greed. Beatrice, left in the ruins of love and trust, made a choice both heart-wrenching and profoundly noble. With her own heart in tatters, she stepped away from the glittering obligations and public life of royalty. to shield her child from the stain of scandal. She retreated to the quiet of a remote farmstead, where palace grandeur gave way to the hum of green fields, the honest rhythm of work, and the solitude that allowed reflection and healing. Her self-sacrifice whispered of a deeper, rarer form of princess duty, one that restored honor. Not through triumph, but through Sophie's role evolved far beyond the title of Edward's wife. She became the Duchess of Discipline and Honor, a figure whose very presence demanded transparency. Her reputation unblemished, vindicated by meticulous evidence that left no doubt of the truth. Every council meeting, every decision carried her firm, uncompromising mark of integrity. Files lay pristine, scandal's residue washed away, replaced by a landscape of accountability and unshakable order. With her eyes closed, Sophie thought about the journey, the sacrifices she had made, and the battles she had fought in silence. Every signature she pressed and every mandate she enacted was a testament to her commitment to protect the crown, to uphold truth, and to ensure that vigilance would never waver. Yet perhaps the most defining moment, the one that would resonate through history, came when Princess Beatrice placed the contract bearing her husband's own signature on the closed council table. The act was a razor-edged combination of courage and merciless self-denial. She faced a room thick with tension, met the stunned eyes of her husband, and the silent, scrutinizing gaze of the royal family. By choosing truth over love and duty over personal happiness, she shattered the life she had once believed was unbreakable. She sacrificed the illusion of perfect love, the shared dreams of a future together, and the warmth of her own heart, all to preserve the integrity of the monarchy. In doing so, she carried a burden heavier than any crown, proving that heroism is often measured not in accolades, but in the quiet, excruciating choices made in the service of something far greater than oneself. In the end, her decision echoed through the palace like a silent vow: duty above all, integrity above attachment, and courage in the face of unbearable loss. What do you think about the potential effects of the scandal on Princess Beatrix's marriage? Please share your thoughts in the comments section. She had defended the crown through the steady, unwavering power of truth rather than with grand gestures or public speeches, leaving behind a legacy of honor that would outlast even the sharpest pangs of personal sorrow.